Before the Civil War, the frontier had plenty of military, and there were a lot of settlers settling down. But then the Civil War happened, and almost all of the military that was guarding the frontier left to go help with war efforts. That left the border unguarded, and natives started to wreak havoc because they realized that military was gone. After the Civil War, U.S. military could focus on establishing the region and the border. There was less danger from Native Americans and outlaws because some of the soldiers came back. Development of railroads made it easier to travel west. Railroads could replace plank roads. Plank roads had problems because it was just a bunch of wood on the ground, so it didn't really help against mud. Canals aren't always accessible and or the best way to transport some goods. With railroads and trains, you could sit down for long journeys, you could bring your family places easier, you could transport goods and livestock. It was also quicker than walking, easier, and safer. Windmills helped get electricity and give other things power. There were few troops and supplies. Forts were too far apart. Military leaders were inexperienced fighting in frontier areas. Supplies for military campaigns were not always available. Weapons took too long to reload, and the natives got access to some of the same weapons as them. Even when they got new, better weapons, it took longer to reload guns, and the natives had bows and arrows that they could reload in seconds. Manifest destiny was the reason for taking land from the natives, so that settlers could move west. Manifest destiny was the idea that it was an obvious path for the country to take land because it was already theirs. They had a belief that it was God's promise to give them land from sea to sea. They believed there was even more for them to have. The purpose of the treaty with the Native Americans was to clear the way for settlements west, so that the idea of manifest destiny, that the U.S. had the duty to spread its culture west to the Pacific Ocean, would be achieved. Many Plain Indians agreed to stop opposing the railroads across the plains, give up any claims to the land they had of the plains, and move on to reservations in Indian Territory. In return, natives would receive large amounts of land for reservations, supplies, and promise that no settlers or soldiers would enter the reservation. Neither side was fully committed to following the treaty. Federal agents often stole or sold food and other supplies meant for the reservations. Most natives did not want to move onto reservations and give up their way of life. Not all Native American groups signed the treaty, which weakened its effectiveness. Many groups did not understand what they were giving up and refused to do so when they found out the requirements. The chiefs that had signed the treaty did not speak for all of the tribes the way that we have one politician leader, so that U.S. never had a treaty with all the plain groups. As settlers moved west, Texas soldiers were needed to protect them from attacks by Native Americans already living in the area. The Texas Plains Indians were defeated and their way of life ended following the Red River War from 1874 to 1875. Units of black soldiers led by white officers gained recognition in both the Red River Wars and the raids on the Apache and in the Rio Grande Valley from 1876 to 1880. The Indians called them Buffalo Soldiers in honor of their bravery. Buffalo soldiers were colored soldiers that protected the land. They faced unfair treatments from the settlers and within the army. They endured harsh conditions, poor supplies, and many battles against Native Americans. They had fought in the Union Army during the Civil War. They may have seen opportunities for themselves by continuing to serve in the Army and took pride in their service. They had to serve where they were assigned. Natives either fought expansion or adapted and moved onto reservations. Some of the most violent tribes did not agree to move onto the reservations and disliked the idea of settlers trying to corner them off. They refused to move. The Comanche refused to move onto reservations and led a band of Comanche fighters who refused to move onto reservations and then led a band of Comanche fighters who resigned at Anglo-American settlements on the plains. He planned a surprise attack on a small camp of buffalo hunters in the Panhandle, but retreated after losing many fighters. He surrendered at Fort Sill in 1875, the last band of Comanche to do so. Destroying the buffalo would subdue and destroy the Native Americans' way of life. They could get lots of money for selling the hides and meats from their kills. Native Americans depended on it for food, clothes, and shelter, so it caused a lot of problems when they needed them, and all the buffaloes in the immediate area were hunted and killed. The buffalo hunters thought that killing the buffaloes would get rid of the natives. The end of their traditional way of life, was had as their source of food, shelter, and clothing, and other goods were destroyed. They started to fight back and send people to kill the buffalo hunters. The native population shrunk and the settlers' population grew. They had people die in battle and other killed settlers. The Battle of the Adobe Wall and the effects of the Battle of Palo Duro Canyon. The natives had a lot less people, but they also had guns. The natives lost 15 soldiers, whereas the hunters only lost 2. The natives retreated, and the villages around and in Palo Duro Canyon were burnt down.